The voltage hit my neck like 1,000 needles of fire. My vision went white. My knees buckled and I felt the cold kitchen tile against my cheek before I even registered falling. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard laughter. Her laughter. My daughter-in-law stood over me, her thumb still pressed against the remote control, her eyes gleaming with something I can only describe as satisfaction. She thought I was annoying. She thought I deserved this. What she didn't know was that the Henderson security camera had a perfect view through our kitchen window. And in 72 hours, that footage would be playing on loop in a courtroom while a judge decided just how many years she'd spend behind bars. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I ended up with a shock collar around my neck in the first place. My name is Diana Ashford. I'm 73 years old, a retired librarian, and until 18 months ago, I thought I knew what family meant. I thought the word home meant safety. I thought growing old meant being surrounded by people who loved you. I was wrong about all of it. This is the story of how my own family turned me into a prisoner in my own house, how they tortured me for their entertainment, and how a neighbor's security camera became the key to my freedom. This is the story of the worst 6 weeks of my life and the justice that followed. My son Marcus married Vivian 3 years ago. I remember the wedding like it was yesterday, standing in that garden venue, watching my only child promise his life to a woman I barely knew. They'd only dated for 8 months. Marcus said it was love at first sight. I said it was fast. He told me I was being controlling. That was the first time Vivian's mask slipped just for a second. She smiled at me over his shoulder and that smile said, "I've already won." But I pushed the feeling down. I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted to believe I was just being an overprotective mother. So when Marcus lost his job 6 months later, and they asked to move into my house, I said yes. My husband Robert had passed away 4 years earlier, and the house felt too empty anyway. I thought having them there would be good for all of us. The first month was fine, pleasant even. Vivian cooked dinner twice a week. Marcus helped with the yard work. We watched movies together on Friday nights. I started to think I'd been wrong about her. Then the job market got worse, and Marcus couldn't find work. The savings I'd offered to help them with started running low, and Vivian's true face began to show. It started small. She'd make comments about how much space my belongings took up, how my furniture was outdated, how my routine was inconvenient for them. When I'd wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, like I'd done for 50 years, she'd complain that I was too loud, that I was disrupting their sleep. When I'd watch my favorite shows in the evening, she'd say I was hogging the living room. When I'd talk about my day, she'd roll her eyes and whisper to Marcus that I was being annoying again. Marcus started changing. My son, who used to call me every day before they moved in, stopped making eye contact. He'd leave the room when I entered. He started repeating Vivian's complaints word for word like she'd programmed him. "Mom, you really are kind of annoying. Mom, could you just be quieter? Mom, do you have to talk so much?" I tried to adapt. I started staying in my bedroom more. I used headphones to watch TV. I whispered when I moved around the house in the morning. But it was never enough. Vivian found new things to criticize. I breathed too loudly. I opened cabinets too slowly. I asked too many questions. According to her, my very existence was an inconvenience. 4 months after they moved in, I overheard them talking in their bedroom. The door was cracked, and I was walking past to get to the bathroom. "We need to do something about your mother," Vivian said. Her voice had that sharp edge it got when she was angry. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. He sounded tired. He always sounded tired now. "She's driving me insane. Every little thing she does sets my teeth on edge. The way she hums while she makes coffee. The way she shuffles her feet. The way she breathes, Marcus, I can't stand it anymore. She's trying to stay out of the way. It's not enough. This is supposed to be our house now. She's the guest. She needs to act like it." I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand pressed against the wall for support. This was my house. The house Robert and I had bought 45 years ago. The house where I'd raised Marcus. The house where every wall held a memory. And now I was being called a guest in it. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus asked. "I want you to man up and tell her she needs to be invisible. She needs to not exist until we decide we want to deal with her. And if she can't do that, then maybe she needs to find somewhere else to live." I went back to my room without using the bathroom. I sat on my bed and cried as quietly as I could manage. The next morning, Marcus knocked on my door. He didn't look at me when I opened it. "Mom, we need to talk." He told me that I needed to be more considerate of them. That they were stressed about money and jobs, and I wasn't making it easier. He said I should stay in my room more, only come out for meals, and try to minimize my presence in the house. I asked him if he was serious. He finally looked at me, and I barely recognized the person staring back. Mom, please just try to cooperate. So I did. I became a ghost in my own home. I'd wait until I heard them leave a room before entering it. I ate meals quickly and retreated back to my bedroom. I stopped trying to make conversation. I stopped humming. I stopped living. But Vivian wasn't satisfied. She'd find reasons to complain. I'd walked too close to her. I'd looked at her wrong. I'd existed in her peripheral vision. She started making these sounds when I was around. These exaggerated sigh, these groans of frustration. Marcus would hear them and automatically tell me to go to my room, even if I was just getting a glass of water. 2 weeks into this new arrangement, I came downstairs for breakfast and found Vivian at the kitchen table with her laptop. She was shopping online, scrolling through page after page of something I couldn't quite see. When she noticed me, she minimized the window quickly, but not before I caught a glimpse. It looked like some kind of pet supply website. "What are you looking at?" I asked, trying to keep my voice friendly. "None of your business?" she snapped. "Don't you have somewhere else to be?" I made my toast and went back upstairs. But something about that moment stuck with me. Something about the guilt that flashed across her face. 3 days later, a package arrived. Vivian brought it inside quickly and took it straight to their bedroom. That night, I heard them talking in low voices, followed by laughter. The kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl because you know you're the punchline of a joke you haven't heard yet. The next morning, everything changed. I came downstairs for breakfast. Same as always. Marcus and Vivian were already in the kitchen sitting at the table. Between them sat a small cardboard box. "Mom, sit down," Marcus said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "What's going on?" "Just sit down." I sat. Vivian was smiling. Not a happy smile, a predatory smile. Marcus pulled something out of the box. At first I thought it was a belt. Then I saw the small black box attached to it, the metal prongs, the remote control he held in his other hand. "What is that?" I whispered. "It's a training collar," Vivian said. Her voice was cheerful, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "For dogs, but it's going to work perfectly for you." My blood went cold. "Excuse me, you heard her," Marcus said. He still wouldn't look at me. "You can't seem to control yourself. You can't seem to understand what we need from you. So we're going to help you learn. This is insane. You can't be serious." Vivian's smile widened. "We're completely serious. You're going to put this on and you're going to wear it all the time. And every time you annoy us, every time you do something we've told you not to do, you're going to get a reminder." "A reminder?" She held up the remote control and pressed the button. A small light blinked on the device, an electric shock. "Nothing that'll kill you, just enough to help you remember your place." I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "Absolutely not. This is abuse. This is illegal. I'm calling the police." Marcus stood too. He was bigger than me, stronger, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own son. "You're not calling anyone. You don't have your phone anymore." I reached for my pocket automatically. My phone was gone. When had they taken it? "We took it last night while you were sleeping," Vivian said, "along with your purse, your car keys, and your computer. You don't get those back until you prove you can behave." "This is kidnapping. This is torture. You can't do this, can't we?" Vivian walked around the table toward me. "You're a senile old woman living in your son's house. Who's going to believe you over us? Besides, once you learn to control yourself, you'll thank us. This is for your own good. Marcus, please." I turned to my son, begging. "You can't let her do this. I'm your mother." For just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or guilt. But then Vivian touched his arm, and whatever I'd seen disappeared. "Put it on, Mom. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I didn't put it on voluntarily. Vivian called it making this harder than it has to be. I call it fighting for my humanity, but I was a 73-year-old woman against 2 people in their 30s. The outcome was inevitable. They held me down in the kitchen chair. I screamed. I fought. I begged. Marcus held my arms while Vivian fastened the collar around my neck. The nylon was rough against my skin. The metal prongs pressed cold against my throat. When she tightened it, I felt the clasp click into place with a finality that made my stomach drop. "There," Vivian said, stepping back to admire her work. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" I was sobbing. My whole body was shaking. "Please take it off, please." "Not until you learn." She held up the remote. "Now let's establish some rules. Rule 1, you stay in your room unless we give you permission to come out. Rule 2, you don't speak unless we ask you a direct question. Rule 3, you don't make any noise. No humming, no singing, no talking to yourself, nothing. Do you understand? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had closed up with fear and rage and disbelief. Vivian pressed the button. The shock lasted maybe 2 seconds. It felt like an eternity. Every muscle in my body seized. My neck felt like it was on fire. The pain was so intense, so overwhelming that I couldn't even scream. When it stopped, I gasped and nearly fell out of the chair. I asked if you understood, Vivian said calmly. Yes, I choked out. Yes, I understand. Good. See, you're learning already. That was the beginning of 6 weeks that I can only describe as hell. They let me out of my room 3 times a day for meals. I had 15 minutes to eat and then I had to go back upstairs. I was allowed to use the bathroom, but I had to announce it first and wait for permission. If I took too long, Vivian would come upstairs and shock me through the door until I hurried. The collar was waterproof, so I couldn't even take it off to shower. Vivian had removed the lock from my bedroom door and taken all the tools from the garage so I couldn't try to cut it off. And the clasp required a special key that she kept on a chain around her neck. Always tucked under her shirt, always just out of reach. She shocked me for everything. For walking too loudly, for sighing, for looking at her the wrong way, for existing in her presence for too long. Sometimes she did it for no reason at all, just because she could. She'd hold up the remote, her finger hovering over the button, and watch me flinch. Then she'd laugh. Marcus pretended not to notice. He'd leave the room when it happened, or he'd put in headphones, or he'd suddenly need to check something on his phone. He became an expert at being present, but not seeing, at hearing but not listening, at knowing but not acknowledging. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping. Every time I started to drift off, I'd jolt awake, my hand flying to my neck, my heart racing with phantom shocks. I had bruises on my arms from where they'd grabbed me that first day. The skin under the collar was raw and irritated. I looked in the mirror one morning and didn't recognize the person staring back. I'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. I tried to escape once. It was late at night, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. I snuck downstairs as quietly as I could, heading for the front door. I just wanted to get to a neighbor's house, anyone's house, someone who could call the police, someone who could help me. I made it to the living room before the shock hit. I collapsed, convulsing on the carpet. When I could see again, Vivian was standing over me in her bathrobe, the remote in her hand. "Did you really think I wouldn't hear you?" she asked. "I'm a light sleeper, Diana. And you're not as quiet as you think you are." She shocked me again and again and again. She didn't stop until Marcus came down and told her that was enough. Even then, I could see she wanted to keep going. "If you try that again," she said, crouching down next to where I lay, shaking on the floor, "I'll set this thing to maximum, and I won't stop until you pass out. Do you understand me?" I nodded. I couldn't speak. I couldn't do anything except lie there and wish I would die. By week 5, I'd stopped being a person. I was a thing that existed in the house, a problem they occasionally had to deal with. I obeyed every rule. I stayed silent. I made myself as small as possible. But it still wasn't enough for Vivian. The problem was that my mere existence annoyed her, and there was nothing I could do about existing except stop. I thought about it. I really did. Late at night, alone in my room, the collar heavy around my neck, I thought about ways to make it all stop. But every time I got close to that edge, I'd remember Robert. I'd remember the life we'd built together. I'd remember that this house was mine, that I'd earned my place in the world, and that giving up meant letting Vivian win completely. So, I endured, and I waited, because I knew deep down that this couldn't last forever. Something would have to give eventually. That something turned out to be a Wednesday afternoon in October. Vivian had friends coming over. She told me I wasn't allowed to come downstairs at all, not even for meals. She'd bring me a sandwich later, maybe if she remembered. I was to stay in my room, keep quiet, and pretend I didn't exist. I heard them arrive around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 4 women all laughing and chatting. They settled in the living room, which was directly below my bedroom. I could hear their conversation through the floor. They were talking about marriages, about annoying in-laws, about the difficulties of living with older family members. My mother-in-law drives me absolutely insane. One of them said, "She comments on everything. How I cook, how I clean, how I raise the kids. I swear if she lived with us, I'd lose my mind." "You think that's bad?" Another voice chimed in. My husband's father moved in with us last year, and the man acts like he owns the place. Doesn't clean up after himself, leaves his stuff everywhere, watches TV at full volume. It's a nightmare. There was a pause. Then Vivian's voice, with that edge of smugness I knew so well. Want to know how I solved that problem? What do you mean? Marcus's mom lives with us, and she used to be just as annoying as all of yours. Used to be. What did you do? Kick her out? Vivian laughed. Better. I trained her. Trained her like a dog. Exactly like a dog. I heard one of the women gasp. You're joking. I'm not. Come on, I'll show you. I heard footsteps on the stairs. My door opened without a knock. Vivian walked in, followed by 4 women I'd never seen before. They stared at me sitting on my bed, their eyes widening when they saw the collar. Oh my God, one of them whispered. Is that a shock collar? Another asked. Sure is, Vivian said proudly. She held up the remote. Watch this. Diana, stand up. I stood. I'd learned not to hesitate. Diana, bark like a dog. My face burned with humiliation. I looked at the women staring at me, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust to horrified fascination. I opened my mouth to refuse, and Vivian's finger moved toward the button. I barked once quietly. Louder, Vivian commanded. I barked louder. The women didn't laugh. They just stared. This is insane, one of them said. Vivian, this is abuse. Oh, please. She was making our lives miserable. Now she's manageable. It's a win-win. Where's Marcus? Does he know about this? It was his idea, Vivian lied smoothly. I wanted to scream that it wasn't that Marcus had been reluctant at first, that she'd pushed him into it, but I stayed silent. Speaking would mean getting shocked, and I couldn't take any more shocks today. I think we should go, another woman said. She was already backing toward the door. Come on, don't be dramatic, Vivian said. But they were leaving, all of them, practically running down the stairs. I heard the front door open and close 4 times. Vivian turned back to me, her face twisted with rage. You ruined my party. I didn't do anything, I said quietly. You existed. That's enough. She pressed the button and held it down longer than she ever had before. I fell. My head hit the corner of the nightstand on the way down. The pain in my neck was so intense, I couldn't even process the new pain in my head. I was dimly aware of blood, of Vivian standing over me, of her voice saying something I couldn't understand through the ringing in my ears. Then everything went black. I woke up on my bedroom floor. My head was throbbing. When I touched my temple, my fingers came away sticky with blood. The collar was still around my neck. Vivian was gone. I managed to get to the bathroom and clean the wound. It wasn't deep, but it would definitely bruise. I looked at my reflection and barely recognized myself. My hair was greasy and unkempt. My face was gaunt. My eyes were hollow. The collar sat around my neck like a noose. Something inside me broke in that moment. Or maybe it finally healed. I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't survive another day as Vivian's pet, her toy, her victim. I had to get out, and I had to get out now. But I was locked in. I had no phone, no keys, no way to contact anyone. The windows in my room didn't open wide enough to climb through. I was trapped unless I could get to the kitchen. I waited until evening until I heard Vivian and Marcus go to bed. Then I waited another 2 hours to be sure. Moving as silently as I possibly could, I opened my bedroom door and crept downstairs. Every step felt like it took an hour. Every creak of the old house made my heart stop. I made it to the kitchen without being caught. I went straight to the knife block, pulled out the largest knife I could find, and headed for the back door. If I could just get outside, I could run to the Hendersons' house next door. They were good people. They'd help me. My hand was on the doorknob when the shock hit. I'd been shocked before, but this was different. This was the highest setting, I realized later. This was Vivian making good on her promise from the last time I'd tried to escape. The pain was indescribable. Every nerve in my body felt like it was being torn apart. My muscles seized so hard I thought my bones would break. I collapsed completely, the knife skittering across the kitchen floor. I was aware of Vivian standing over me. Her hand on the remote, her face contorted with rage. I was aware of Marcus behind her, finally looking horrified. I was aware of the pain continuing wave after wave because she wouldn't take her finger off the button. Then I was aware of nothing at all. I woke up in a hospital. The first thing I noticed was that the collar was gone. My neck felt impossibly light without it. The second thing I noticed was the police officer sitting in a chair by my bed. Miss Ashford, she said gently when she saw I was awake. I'm Officer Patricia Moore. How are you feeling? What happened? My voice was rough, barely a whisper. You're safe now. You've been unconscious for about 18 hours. You had a seizure caused by prolonged electrical shock. You also have significant bruising, malnutrition, and injuries consistent with long-term abuse. The memories came flooding back. The collar, Vivian, the kitchen. How did I get here? Your neighbors, the Hendersons, they called 911. She pulled out a tablet and turned it toward me. They have a security camera on their back porch. It faces their yard, but it also captures a clear view of your kitchen window. She pressed play. I watched myself on the screen, small and grainy, but recognizable. I watched myself enter the kitchen, take the knife, head for the door. Then I watched myself collapse. The video had no sound, but I could remember the pain as I watched my own body convulse on the kitchen floor. I watched Vivian come into frame, the remote held high like a trophy. I watched her press the button and hold it, her face twisted in an expression that could only be described as gleeful. The timestamp showed she held it for 43 seconds. 43 seconds of electrical current running through my body. The video showed Marcus finally grabbing her arm, pulling her away, her fighting to keep the button pressed. The Hendersons saw this on their camera's live feed, Officer Moore said quietly. They called 911 immediately. The paramedics had to break down your front door. Your son and daughter-in-law tried to prevent them from entering. Where are they now? In custody. They've been formally charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, aggravated assault, torture, and elder abuse. The district attorney is considering additional charges. I started crying. Not from sadness, not from trauma, but from the sheer overwhelming relief that it was over, that someone had seen, that someone had believed, that I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone, and I didn't have to go back to that house with those people ever again. The trial happened fast. With video evidence that clear, there wasn't much room for defense. Vivian's lawyer tried to argue that I'd been a difficult house guest, that they'd been at their wits' end, that the caller was an extreme but understandable response to an impossible situation. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Vivian was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Marcus got 8 years. The judge called their actions depraved, unconscionable, and a betrayal of the most fundamental bonds of family and humanity. She said that the video evidence showed not just abuse, but enjoyment of that abuse, and that made it so much worse. I was there in the courtroom when the sentences were read. Vivian screamed that it wasn't fair, that I deserved it, that I'd driven her to it. Marcus just sat there, silent and pale. Finally seeing what he'd become. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no closure, just emptiness where my family used to be. The Hendersons were there too. Jim and Carol Henderson, the neighbors I'd exchanged pleasantries with for 20 years, but never really known. They'd saved my life, and I'd never be able to thank them enough. We're just glad we could help, Carol said when I tried, when we saw what was happening on that camera. God, Diana. We should have noticed something was wrong sooner. You couldn't have known. Maybe, but we'll know better next time. We'll all know better. I'm still in my house. My house. It took me months before I could walk through it without flinching, without expecting pain. I had the locks changed. I got a new phone number. I adopted a cat named Justice who sleeps on my bed every night and reminds me that I'm not alone. The physical scars healed. The scar on my temple faded to a thin white line. The raw skin on my neck recovered, but the psychological scars run deeper. I can't stand anything touching my neck. I have nightmares about electricity. Sometimes I hear Vivian's laugh in quiet moments, even though I know she's in a prison cell 300 meters away. But I'm healing slowly, painfully, incompletely, but healing nonetheless. I see a therapist twice a week. I've joined a support group for abuse survivors. I'm learning to trust people again, to believe that not everyone is hiding cruelty behind a smile. And I've become an advocate. I speak at conferences about elder abuse. I work with legislators on laws to protect vulnerable seniors. I tell my story to anyone who will listen, because I know I'm not the only one this has happened to. Elder abuse happens every day in homes all across this country behind closed doors where no one can see. I was lucky. I had neighbors with a security camera pointed in just the right direction. Most people aren't that lucky. So, I tell my story over and over again in the hope that someone who needs to hear it will. That someone being abused will realize they deserve better. That someone witnessing abuse will have the courage to report it. That someone planning abuse will think twice and stop. My name is Diana Ashford. I'm 74 years old now. I survived 6 weeks of torture at the hands of my own family, and I'm still here, still fighting, still living. And that more than any prison sentence is the real victory.